I um, was basically asked to leave the CMO role because I think it was hard for people to believe that the work that myself and the team were doing was actually driving impact. As a CMO, it is very hard to show that you're doing a good job. It's not as easy to measure. So what I'm doing at Upside is different because I'm tackling the B2B space where it's even more complicated. Like I remember looking at one of our customers, they had a deal that was 3 million and it was like 10,000 touch points. So if you go and you look and you like basically split everything, like most of the credit, there were just a lot of emails. But if you go and you read those emails, and I did, they're all like scheduling emails and there were a lot of marketing emails that weren't sent, but like then there were probably certain things that really made a difference. So to really understand what works, you have to find what those things are. But the problem is all those things are hidden. They're like signals that are hidden in emails and call transcripts.
Welcome back to Horizons podcast, where I sit down with marketers and convince them to spill their secrets for the rest of us. Today, I'm sitting down with Mada Seghete. Mada, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Nate. Really excited to be here.
Mada, you are a powerhouse. You co-founded Branch, built it to a $4 billion valuation, and now you're revolutionizing B2B attribution through Upside. What was this journey like going from the Upside or going into Upside and from Branch?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think after being a Branch for 10 years, and I think at the end, I was leading marketing and I had a pretty large team and we were, I think from 400 people at the time. It was definitely interesting to go back into starting from scratch again. And there are some awesome parts of it where it's really fun to be building, but it's also really hard to not have resources. And I think it took me some time. My days were very much manager mode, right? Like I was mostly directing and then I went back to like doing a lot of IC work and I do love it. It was hard at the beginning. The transition was like, I kind of forgot how it felt to not have an EA. And if you want something done, you do it yourself. But it's been really fun. I'm definitely all in now and I've adjusted, but I think, the transition was challenging at the beginning, I would say.
It is a really interesting, and they're very different skill sets. What do you think are the
Yeah.
biggest things that people who are ICs themselves are missing about what it's like managing?
I mean, I think I struggle with that. I think, and I've seen others, when you are a very good IC, you tend to, and usually like very good, like early employees of startups or founders. I think the hardest thing when you start managing people is understanding that the way you would do something that is like the best way in your opinion is maybe not the same way that someone else might do it. And I think people tend to micromanage others and they have these high expectations that feel frustrated when others won't live up or won't do things the way they had it. So I think it's like understanding that not everyone's skill set is the same as yours and they might not do the work the way you would do it and like allowing others to have their own freedom and their own way of doing things. That I think if you think you know exactly how something needs to be done and you tell someone exactly how it needs to be done, maybe they'll do it, but I don't think that's what gets people to shine. I think what gets people to shine is giving them goals and giving them a lot of like independence in how they reach those goals and understanding that they might shine at different things and might not do things your way.
I remember in my very first job, it was at a startup, and my manager did exactly what you described, with very clear goals and then room to achieve that goal in the way that I think is going to be best. And it did work really, really well, because then you find like, oh, maybe their strength is this, but my strength is something else, and both can get to the goal. But if I try to do it in the way that is their strength, I won't do it as well as if I lean into my own. That's
Yeah.
awesome. You've been working in the attribution space for a very, very, very long time. For anyone
Yeah.
in the audience who maybe is not as deep in it as you are, can you explain briefly why are you tackling this differently with Upside than you did with Branch?
Well, I think at the branch, we were solving mobile attribution. So we were helping B2C companies like, Nordstrom or Spotify to help understand like what's working when it comes to where they're getting users, and like how are they converting those users and what channels are working. I think the interesting thing about it was we were helping others solve the problem, but we couldn't solve our own problem, right? So it was really hard for us to really figure out what's working for us. And I talk a lot about this. So I had my own challenges at Branch where I um, was basically asked to leave the CMO role at different times because I think it was hard for people to believe that the work that myself and the team were doing was actually driving impact. And I think different people have different opinions. And if you can't really understand what's working, it's really hard to like know how to like spend your money properly, how to drive growth. And I think that's the challenge with CMOs in general, and especially CMOs of B2B companies. So the CMO role has a shortest tenure, which I'm sure you know, out of all the different roles. And I think there's two main reasons for this. One is as a CMO, you have such a varied amount of like skills that you need to do. You need to be good at design and at brand and like at numbers and demand gen. It's just very, and the type of people on your team are different. And there's just the type of things that you're supposed to do are just so varied. And so it's very hard for one person to be good at all of it. And then the
Yeah.
second one is I think it is very hard to show that you're doing a good job. It's not like as easy to measure. And I think, as a sales is like a head of sales kind of manages a team that's fairly like similar type people with similar type roles, and they're very close, and it's very clear if they're doing a good job or not doing a good job because they're driving revenue. But I think like from a CMO perspective, it's like, oh, they're driving pipeline and they're driving brand and they're driving demand. And sometimes it's hard to like know if that demand was driven by them or by the salespeople. So I think what I'm doing at Upside is different because I'm tackling like the B2B space where it's even more complicated. You have very large deals with a lot of people. The deals take, you know, a year, 2 years. And like what really worked? Did the thing that marketing did a year ago, was that the thing that worked? Or was it just the AE that ended up closing the deal? So I think it's just a way more complicated problem than B2B attribution. And I think when I started Upside, there were people who told me that they don't think I should start this company because it's not possible to solve this problem. And I think even when we started Upside, we were a little bit naive in the way we approach a problem. I think we were in like deep research for like 9 months. I think our current like approach is quite different than everything else in the market.
Oh, that's interesting. And did your current approach evolve quite a bit then in those 9 months and beyond?
Yeah, 100%. So I think like when we started at Branch, we had built this internal attribution tool. We called it Pipe Dash, and it was basically multi-touch attribution. We looked at like
Yeah.
we looked at all the different touch points between sales, marketing, BD, and we gave a weight to every touch point. We say, okay, well, like meetings are 1 point, and or like meetings are 10 points, and an email is 1 point, and a webinar is 30 points. Someone did one of those things, then we get a certain amount of points, and then we would like split the pipeline or the revenue among all the points that were allocated.
Smart.
So we were like, oh, this sounds smart, right? And I think
Yeah.
if you look at like what others in the what our competition is doing right now, it's very similar to that. I think when we started, so the first few months, we basically worked with a few design partners and we rebuilt this for them using like Data Studio. We're just basically building proof of concepts. And then I remember looking at deals and I was like, man, like this does not look right. Like I remember looking at one of our customers, they had a deal that was 3 million and it was like 10,000 touch points. So if you go and you look and you like basically split everything, like most of the credit, there were just a lot of emails. But if you go and you read those emails, and I did, they're all like scheduling emails, and there were a lot of marketing emails that were never they were like sent, but like and they were so but then there were probably certain things that really made a difference. So it's like, no, we like to really understand what works, you have to find what those things are. But the problem is all those things are like hidden. They're like signals that are hidden in emails and call transcripts. And someone might have gone to like an event, but they didn't register. So there's like all this wealth of information that's not properly structured. And then the other thing that we found was this idea that like when you look at an account and you like start looking at this like there are two types of touch points, at the touch points that the customer does and the touch points that like you're doing
True.
trying to engage the customer. So we're calling those bids versus engagements. And if you look at just the engagements over time, the customer engagements, you can see that there is actually a pattern. If you map it over time, you can, and you give a velocity to their engagements, there's usually an inflection point. And if you go and you can visually look and understand where the inflection point, and you look around the inflection point, you can see the things that really move the needle. So we're now trained a team of agents to like do that. Like we first manually did ourselves, and then we started like doing it automatically using AI and agents. Okay, I talked a lot.
I love that. That is brilliant. It's like you're the Palantir of B2B attribution. You're tracking down exactly what's happening and mapping it all together. That is
We're
genius.
building a knowledge graph for the customer's data to understand, like to basically like do persona resolution and campaign resolution and pulling data from different places and like recreating what happened. So everything in our dashboard is not really the customer's data. It's a recreation of the customer's data that's enhanced. So if there's like an email chain, we will pull up every email in the email chain and give it its own touch point. So maybe the CEO sent the first email, but that wasn't tracked. But then he forwarded to the AE. The CEO email in our system appears at its own touch point because we recreated that using the signal that we found in the data.
So essentially, you have access to certain data points, and through that, you infer the other data points that maybe
We
you don't
infer,
track.
yeah, basically, that's exactly what we're
That's
building. Yeah, and that's
interesting.
kind of like the idea of a knowledge graph, right? Like we're not like
Yeah.
structuring the data in a regular database. We're building like this knowledge graph.
So if we take this concept of, I forget exactly what you said, but bids and outgoing communications from the company,
Engagements.
engagements, thank you. If like I went to an event with one of your companies and they didn't track that I went to that event, but then in a sales call 6 months later, I mentioned, oh, I really loved this event that you did. You could, from that sales transcript,
Yeah.
recreate that, oh, Nate actually went to this event and that played a role in his conversion.
Yeah, exactly. We already do that. So we use basically AI to track that and say, and we have a lot of examples where the deal analysis shows, hey, the CEO went to this event, even though there was no mention of that. The AI read that there was the event and then read the email and inferred that there was actually, there should have been, we call it like shadow touch points there.
That is incredible. It's like in a car accident, you take the black box of the car and you try to recreate how the
Yeah,
accident happened. You kind of do that with
we call
the
it
sales conversion.
forensic attribution, and some people love it, some people hate it. I think it's like because we're recreating things that happened that weren't there, like I think the forensic is a cool way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that is absolutely genius. So then if I'm the CMO and I'm trying to understand what's happening in my company, what would the resulting output look like?
So like what we call the account explorer is almost like a debug tool. You can go and look at every account and you can see all the different opportunities and like what drove every opportunity. But that's not really what the CMO wants, right? Like a CMO wants an aggregated version of that. So then we start
Yeah.
aggregating that. So you can go and look at like what we have, we call campaign and channel scorecards and campaign and channel comparisons. So you can go and like look at every campaign and understand like more traditional metrics like how much how many accounts did it touch, how many accounts progressed after touch. All of those are just not using AI. They're just like in our dashboard, which is make it much easier to find that data in Salesforce. But then we also have tiles that show you how many like deal activations that were like found by AI, like was this part of, right? So like it could be that this like newsletter like touched 1,000 people and like it's that's fine. But like actually, it was part of like 3 deals in those like few touch points that really got the deal going. So then, as a CMO, you can start understanding what are like overall you can start comparing and understanding, okay, what are like the campaigns that are like activating accounts, activating deals, activating people, and start like understanding what's really working, where to invest next.
That's incredible. So if you look back at like the more traditional ways of doing this, MMMs, MMTs, all these fancy acronyms,
Yeah.
basically trying to understand what is incremental and what is attributional. This seems like it helps a lot with the attributional side of maybe this person didn't register for my event, but I know from the sales call they came to the event. Does it help with the ROI and the incrementality side also to say how incremental was this event? Would I still need to do holdback? How do you think about the incrementality side of this?
Yeah, I think that's next step in what we're building. I think there are other companies that are doing incrementality. I think when we actually tried doing incrementality at the beginning and we ran a few models on it, we found that the problem with doing it until you have a better, more structured data, it's like you get the wrong results. So you can get incrementality now, but because like you're seeing so much missing data, it didn't make sense. So we decided that we want to like actually build the knowledge graph first and get a much more solid understanding of what really happened before we like start using econometrics and like doing incrementality. The way I think we're probably going to start, the first foray into incrementality is probably going to be something like, for this deal, you can like say, okay, I want to try these 5 things. Which one will like have the highest potential increase in my likelihood of closing a deal? So we're definitely going in that direction. And that's how we started. We thought we could do it. And then when we tried it, it just wasn't right because the data wasn't clean enough. And I think when you look at everyone else in the market, the biggest problem with attribution, people just don't trust them. They will try it and then they will see a result and be like, oh, but like I don't actually believe this. Because like
Yeah.
it's really hard to like trust like a black box. So we're like, let us really show you what happened so you can always understand and believe it, and you can like drill down all the way to like the account and be like, this is why we gave credit to this thing. You can see where the inflection point changed, and then like we're going to start building these econometrics, but we're just building trust kind of one step at a time.
I've got a crazy question. So in
Yeah.
the traditional world of marketing, incrementality is sort of the gold standard. But in this modern world where you have AI and you have this wealth of unstructured data, emails, sales calls, is there a world in which maybe even better than incrementality, especially for B2B, is just looking at the qualitative information of what people say influence them and what is inferred as influencing them through how they speak in the email and the calls and such?
Maybe I have examples when that people don't know what influenced them. Like,
True.
I'll give you an example. There was one of those really large deals that I looked at manually in the first, when we were building this. There was one of our customers trying to sell a very large pharmacy chain. And they were convinced that what got them to the deal, and they did a whole deal review that he showed to the whole company because it was the largest deal at the time. He basically said that it was like his relationship with like this champion, and like he had been reaching out to the champion for like over a year, and like nothing really shifted, right? And you're like, and if you asked like the champion, I don't know if the champion probably would have been like, yeah, I like their website and I like this guy. But like if when I really mapped the inflection point, there was a point at which something really changed. And then when I looked deeper and deeper, it was basically they had a partnership with Accenture, and Accenture got an intro to the very high levels, like who'd be the sponsor in that company. And that guy got convinced that they should look into this kind of tool. And he forwarded that email to the champion and said, let's look at this. I think this could be good. And that was the moment when everything shifted. And like no one like really like Accenture didn't get any credit in that deal. They never worked with Accenture for that. They worked with them for I think, but not for that particular deal. And like, would the customer know that that's really what shifted the momentum? Probably not. like the team didn't know, like it was there somewhere. Like I found it, but it wasn't, it was very super deep. So I think like sometimes people don't actually know, right? Like I think AI actually can pick up. You're right, AI can pick up what happened, but like the way it does it, it's only if you structure the data. Like the only reason AI would pick up something like this is because that email was brought up and like they understand that there was, and looking at the momentum shift. And so I think it's true. You don't need full econometrics. You can get very good insights just by like having AI look at data, but like you can't just give it a bunch of garbage data. You need to structure it for them to know, and then teach them how to look at it.
When you're identifying an inflection point like this, how do you know that the deal is inflecting? Is it the frequency of contact or more qualitative, like the voice in the contact? How do you know that it's inflected?
Right now we're doing it based on what we call a velocity, and it's basically the amount of engagement from people in a buying group that we've detected over time, right? So like if you're meeting very frequently, but there's meetings that's like the velocity won't build up. But if you're like in a matter of weeks, if you're answering emails, going on calls, going on the website and look at a lot of things, like if you're doing a bunch of stuff, like that kind of engagement shows that there's like interest, and you can see it in deals. I mean, I can give you a demo at some point, but like you can really see it, and you can see it. It looks very different from deals that are lost versus deals that are won. Like people are very engaged,
Oh,
and you can also
interesting.
see when they kind of decide to buy on a deal. You can like see, and then like the deal closes, or like they decide not to buy. You can see that everything shifts down, and even though the deal doesn't close for months after, you can kind of know that when the deal was actually lost.
That is so interesting. How complex is it for a company to implement this? Because a lot of the stuff you're talking about, like knowing that Accenture forwarded this email to the customer, sounds like it
Oh, it's
requires
like not. No,
a
it
lot of
requires
tracking.
nothing.
Really? How do you do it?
And well, like all we need is access to Salesforce, and usually companies put stuff into Salesforce. So that email, like we spent like 6 weeks building email, the duplication, and I think we were joking at some point that in Silicon Valley there's like a thing where they are thinking they're building a music thing, but they're actually building the compressing stuff. It's like we're like maybe we're gonna be an email company, email notification company. But basically, all you have to do is integrate into Salesforce and Marketo, HubSpot, and Gong if you have it, and then it takes about 10 minutes, and then overnight we like run all the data, and then you can get access to the dashboard the next morning. So the reason we're able to pick up an email like that is because it's there. It's just a forward of a forward of a forward. But we are able to like actually, we've written the code that takes like email chains and turns them into its own touch points. So there's no like setup on your side really, which I think some of our customers are like, wow, I can't believe this actually. We have like a quote from Kate, who's a discount CMO, and she's like, I thought it was going to take months, and the next day we had it. So yeah, it's cool. It's just
That
like,
is
it's
incredible.
still, you still need to go to security review. We're going to security review with a bunch of customers now, and we're stuck to compliant, but like people I think sometimes don't believe it's going to be so easy. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that is really, really awesome. It's interesting to me how often we have the data, but we just don't do enough with it and we don't know what to do with it. And so we lose out on a lot of this opportunity to really better understand the sales cycle, understand what's working, what's not working. So I love that. And I also love from a product design standpoint, if you can find something that exists to connect to and leverage that to handle an entire stage of like data collection, it makes everything so much easier for the users to not have to do some custom data collection.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, I think a lot of what we built in that first year, when we were doing more like consulting for people, we were building, we were kept getting new design partners, and we would like learn how to ingest their data and like not ask them to do anything, and learn how to like parse their data on our own. So that has been, yeah, we have my co-founder John, that's an awesome engineer.
That is incredible. Okay, I want to pivot back a little bit to when you were CMO at Branch, and you mentioned you were sort of like asked to step down twice as CMO. What were those experiences like? How did you manage through? Because that's both very frustrating personally, I assume, to go through, and also professionally challenging. How do you manage those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was very hard. I think the first time was when we moved from being more like developer focused to going like actually doing B2B sales. I had no experience in that. So we ended up hiring someone else and I was more like in charge of like developer relations type. And then I think when the person that we hired left, I took over back the team on like more of a trial basis. And then the second time was I think I just didn't really know how to be like how to like show the what my team was doing. And I think I was learning how to be a manager. So I think I think it was a mix of like it was hard for me to show that like the team was doing a good job, but also I think I wasn't like I didn't really know how to like manage a team very well. So I had to go through a lot of self discovery um and then same the second time someone replaced me. She didn't end up working out, and then I think COVID happened, so I like came back in a temporary base. And I think in the meantime, I went and became an evangelist. And everyone always was like, Mada is a great marketer, but she's a good, like, CMO. So I ended up just like going and speaking at conferences. And then but I also did a 360, which was very, very hard. I had a coach interview 15 people from different parts of my life. And she made me write down every single critical thing that every person said about me. And it was so intense. And like it's very when someone is like having issues, I think it's easy to be like, oh, it's but when you hear the same thing 5 times from different people, it's very the problem is obviously you. And I was like, I'm gonna change, I'm gonna be a better leader. So I think I've worked so hard. So I think when I took over the team again, I think part of it was that like I like learned a lot how to like measure. And but I also think I like had done so much personal growth into how to be a better leader. And I think I think there was this one person who I think was one of my most critical, and then she came to me years later and said, hey, seeing you change gave me faith that like people can change and leaders can change. It's not like, so I'm always gonna, that's probably one of the highest compliments that anyone has ever paid me.
That's incredible. And it's interesting to me how often in careers, the person who's really good at something is the one who is naturally recruited to be the leader. So like, oh, Mada, you're great at marketing. Can you make more Madas and be our CMO? But it's a very different skill set to be a
Yeah.
manager than to be a really, really good IC. And so that transition is quite challenging.
Yeah, and I think like bigger companies like do a better job teaching you and doing manager training. And honestly, at Branch, we did end up starting to do manager trainings, and I learned so much. But I think when I like moved from being, I was a founder and in charge of culture, and I was doing a lot of marketing, and I was managing people, and I had just had no idea what I was doing. And I mean, I'm still learning, right? Like, I think even now I do a lot of like, I still do leadership training. I just did this leaders in tech thing, and I feel like I'm still like, we do so much, even though we're very early on, we do founder feedback and we do like various, like, I want to, even though I know my founders well, I want to make sure, co-founders well, I want to make sure that I still get feedback and I keep growing. And yeah.
If someone's listening to this who's, say, a CMO, and maybe they've been CMO for a while, but they have people on their team that they're trying to get to grow into a manager role, what do you think are the like 2 to 3 most critical skills that an IC needs to learn as they move into a manager role?
Think it's like, how do you set goals and how do you set goals that are achievable but also push people a little bit beyond their comfort zone, and how do you hold people accountable for those? How do you learn, how can you like help but and motivate another human to succeed, and find a way to like take advantage of their like things versus yours? I think that was a big one for me. I think those two are like, to me, the biggest ones, right? Like if you can know how to motivate someone to do the best work of their life and empower them by like helping them when they're struggling, and then set goals and keep them accountable. That's like, I think, the main things. And I think it's hard to learn how to do that for someone else. Um,
That is. And that balance between giving someone the space to say, here's the goal, run with it, but then also knowing how do I hold them accountable without micromanaging is very, very difficult, at least for me.
It's very difficult. No, I mean, I'm still learning how to do that. And it's like, it's much easier for me to do it in areas where I don't excel. Like I am very good at, it's easier for me to hold like my engineering or even product co-founder, be like, hey, you said you do this. But like if I'm doing an event and like someone is helping with an event, I'm very good at doing events, so I have very strong opinions. So it's hard to not like go into micromanager mode. So I think sometimes it's hard when you were the one doing it and had such a high standard for yourself, and now you're managing someone doing the work they used to do. I think that actually can make it more challenging.
That is. I remember there's something someone said that stuck with me, which was if someone can do it 80% as well as you, then you should hand it off to them. But to your
Yeah.
point, if it's something you're good at, 80% doesn't look very nice. You don't really want 80%. You want 100%. Uh, so that's quite challenging.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's actually possible because that person is probably going to do 80%, but maybe they'll do some things that you didn't know how to do much better, and you have to let them do that, right? So, like maybe in my
100%.
event, someone won't like be as creative or think about the experience as well, but they would be so much more organized and so it's like, how can you give some, as a manager, like if you shine at something, how can you give advice on that without taking away from their sense of ownership?
True. True. That is a really interesting challenge. Becoming more of a like a coach or a mentor rather than a teacher.
Yeah, or
Speaking of
like in the military, you're not like their commanding officer, you're like their coach slash, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Speaking of teaching, you teach a course or have taught a course at Stanford on growth marketing. How do you teach your
Long time
students
ago.
to think about attribution versus what they might learn in a more traditional attribution place?
Yeah, I mean, this was a while back and it was more on the B2C growth. Honestly, I think at the time we went through all the different attribution models. And I think the main thing when you think about attribution, and I think the thing that I want to change the way market thinks about this, there's two ways to look at attribution. One is let's look at attribution to understand what worked. And that's very much like let's compare things. Let's see, was this impactful or not? And that's a very different type of attribution that like what should get credit for something. And I think there's companies that focus so much on the credit part. So they conflate attribution of like what work with attribution of like, let's split the credit of all our pipeline between different teams and different peoples, and we can maybe even comp them on it. And I think that's a very dangerous path to walk. And actually, in our product, we don't have any kind of people are like, but like, tell me how much did marketing versus sales generate? And I'm like, I can't really tell you that. I can tell you what worked, but if you're asking me to split it between marketing and sales, the moment you start doing that, like you are basically deciding that certain things are more important than others. And I have not found a deal yet where the deal was only generated by marketing or only generated by sales. Like when our AI finds those milestones, it's usually a mix of like the best deals come from, it's very rarely a pure outbound from an SDR. Maybe, I mean, it depends on the company. Some companies are like very clear, but in general, it's usually someone was outbounded by an SDR and then they clicked on a link and they check out the website and like attend the webinar and then they gain interest. So there's usually like a few things that like really help. And like, how do you decide? How do you split even between those five things? Like, and I think all these models, first touch, last touch, even like giving them all the exact same credit amount, like even that doesn't really make sense because they really work together. So I think like this idea of like, let's give credit and like, let's fight over credit, I don't think is the most productive thing. I think like having a joint like goal and then like kind of looking at like everything you're doing and see what works and what doesn't and investing in the things that work, I think that's like the much better way of using attribution.
That is interesting. And you've talked so much about how AI agents are key to this. How exactly do you use AI agents? What does this look like in practice?
So once we structured the data and like started putting it in the knowledge graph, and we've like created like the account story that shows like the inflections of the account over time, we have trained this team of agents to look at the structured data and to figure out like what led to a certain inflection point. We called it milestone analysis. And it's a team of like two agents. One is an analyst agent and one is like a supervisor agent. And they're basically looking at like, okay, there's an inflection point. What happened behind it? Who was the meeting with? When did the meeting happen? How did we meet this person? Were they engaged? How long did it take? So they actually like go and have conversations around what's actually led, and then they come out with like a description, high level, like this is what led to this opportunity, and then a slightly longer 2 sentence descriptions, and then they cite all their sources, which are a mix of like touch points, like this campaign membership, or like Salesforce notes, or like Gong transcripts. So they look, and so then you can like understand why they came up with that conclusion. And that was the first use of it. But now we're building something called deep research, where you can choose any account or opportunity and ask it questions. So you can like basically one thing that we were running with one customer on, they wanted to know for all the deals that closed, won or lost in the last 6 months, what were the competitors that they were around, right? So we used Gong data and email data, and there was actually no information, so we could tell them who they were running against, so they could like see who is our win rate higher with against this competitor versus this competitor.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then another one was like they really wanted to know which meetings, which deals had meetings in person versus not in person, and are like deals with meetings in person more likely to close. So we actually use the AI agent to look through all the structured data and figure out which deals had an in-person meeting. Yeah, so these are the type of things you can start doing with the team of agents once you have a data that's structured enough for them to do this kind of analysis.
That's quite fun. And interesting that you have the supervisor agent and also the analyst agent. Does that improve
Yeah.
the results, or why not just have a single analyst agent?
It does improve the results, and I think a single analyst agent sometimes can like go doesn't have has a harder time sitting within bounds, and having a supervisor agent that has a discussion and ask them to sometimes go and run it again. The supervisor agent has more stricter guidelines, so that gives the analyst agent more freedom as an agent to like look and come up with like things that like are maybe like less structured, but then the
Oh,
structure is more in the supervisor agent, and that's how you make sure that like you're following like pretty strict parameters.
it's fascinating. So it keeps it from going too far astray, but still gets the upside of a little bit more freedom from the analyst agent.
Yeah,
That's
upside,
quite
you use the
cool.
word upside, that was fun.
Unintentional, but I like it. How are you thinking about AI across the other parts of your business? Because the last time that you were running a company, it was many, many, many years ago. Now you're setting up a company in the age of AI. What are you doing differently now with AI versus previously?
I mean everything, like I think as a marketer, AI makes things really fun. You know, I came up with this concept the other day of like your data is broken and there's like these saboteurs who are like messing up your data. And like I gave them fun names like the contact contactless closer, like cell doesn't put people in, you know, in opportunities, or like the invite swapper who gets an invite and sends someone else on their team to the event. And like I like used the AI and I came up like I'm obsessed with Midjourney, and Midjourney came up with like amazing like little like clips, little like images of each saboteur, and then like it even created videos. I like wrote a
That's
LinkedIn post about my experience, you know, like being fired, and like I wrote it, and then like I asked AI to rewrite it, and it was the first time I had a LinkedIn post go viral. And it's sad because I had written that story before in my own words, but the LinkedIn version of it, the AI version of it, was better. Even though it was my story, it just made it like easier to follow. And so I think like, you know, even like I had a bunch of VC meetings and like I want to ask them for interest to like their portfolios. And like I'm using AI to like first I had an agent, something that looked through my email and found all the VCs, and then we're using one of our interns created like a tool using AI that basically finds like what are the right companies. So now we're using a different AI tool to figure out who are their portfolio. So it's like crazy that like there's just so much that I feel I can do and test as a marketer
Yeah.
that I would have needed like a team of 5 people to help me do this before.
It is really interesting. The things that were previously not possible, but now are because the AI can make the time. For instance, these intros to VCs in times past, maybe that's something that's not as feasible to do at scale. But now you can just
Yeah,
throw in the portfolio and say which of these companies are most viable for intros and create draft intros, and all of that can be scaled.
yeah, we're like the saboteurs. I can't afford we can afford the designer to go and like design images and and I gave like
Yeah.
Mid-Journey a thing and it came up with something extremely creative. So
That's
yeah,
incredible.
very cool.
How how do you I'm curious about the LinkedIn one in particular. How do you give it instructions on writing? Because a lot of AI writing is very clearly AI writing. It doesn't look good. It's very fake. How do you give it good instructions to actually make it a useful editor that still keeps your story and your voice without becoming AI?
I mean, I didn't. It did sound like, yeah. I basically wrote the post myself. So it wasn't like I told it to write the post for me. I wrote the post and then I gave it the post that I wrote and I said, make it viral on LinkedIn.
Fair. I
And
love that.
that's all I did. And like, I think I still made some small changes to it, but I mean, you can go and see it. And
Yeah.
I remember being like, this doesn't sound like me. And I asked my boyfriend, who is like big in tech and he's very good at this stuff. And he was like, you should just try the AI one. He's like, the other one sounds like you, but maybe try the other one. And I was like, okay, I'll just try and see what happens. And I was like, oh, I can't believe it worked.
I
Yeah.
love that example because sometimes you do need a really complex prompt and really detailed inputs. And sometimes it is as simple as just being like, make this a viral LinkedIn post, and it can figure out what that means. That's a really good example.
Yeah. Especially if it has a full on post that was pretty good, I think, to start with. It just
Yes.
like restructured it and made it easier to follow. And it had the whole thing LinkedIn where you say something and you wait. And I'm pretty sure all the ones on LinkedIn like use AI to make them, but still when I read them, I know it's still easier to follow the story. So even though I know it's written by AI, I know also that it's based on a real story and now I can like follow it more easily.
How do you think, as you're building your company today, how do you think about being in San Francisco versus being somewhere else in the world?
I mean, this is where it's at, right? Like I think I mentioned to you earlier that I lived in a hacker house for the past few
Yes.
months and like I'm all in on the SF ethos. Like I'm over 40 and we ended up like joining this residency and we didn't need, we didn't, we raised a lot of money but I think it's just like being around the energy that's in SF now. It's like very infectious. And like now we're like, how do we recreate it? I was like, maybe instead of having an office, we should move into like a more shared space, like being around other people who are like making so much progress and using things. There's something very magical about that. And I think like you don't need to be here to build a company today. I think I love being here because I think I'm an empath but I get extremely like I'm very sensitive to the energy of the people around me. And when there's very high energy, like it's just really fun and like I find myself working harder, being more excited, and SF is very different now than it was like during COVID. There's just something really cool about it. I have another friend from London who just raised around and he was staying at my house while I was in this hacker house. And he was like, I need to move to SF. Like, it's just like the energy here and it's just very different.
That is incredible. I remember noticing a long time ago how a lot of the best athletes or like the world record breaking athletes turn out to be from the same teams, where it's like, oh, this team has like five record breaking athletes at the same time. Because I think it is that energy of like, oh, you're working together. I'm running fast. You're running fast. We're pushing each other to do more than we do alone. And kind of the same thing in
Totally.
that sort of setting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with HF0 Like they don't really, the main thing is like you live in a house and they take care of everything so you can focus on work, and we work like nonstop. But then like you do this Monday demo dinners, and on Monday demo dinner, even though the companies are in different, like just seeing how much someone else has achieved, you want to also like achieve a lot, and like, so there's this like, we're all like competing, but not really competing because we're such different industries, and even like the stages of companies are different. But like there's something around like there's the accountability about being around other people, and then like you're like there at midnight and other people are working. Yeah, there's something around when you're surrounded by people. I think it's similar to athletes, and then I think SF right now is a really good like point for that. I don't think it's the only one in the world. It's just the one I know best.
Yes, yes. And speaking of that area of business building, you've built 2 businesses that are VC backed. Would you ever think about doing a bootstrapped, non-VC backed company? What are the pros and cons? I'm sure you thought this through in building
I have
Upside.
thought this through. I have thought this through. I probably wouldn't do a bootstrapped company. I think, like when you think about who you are in your time and stuff, there's like, I believe in the diversification. And it's not that I think when you are doing a company, you're already sacrificing so much of your life into that company. You are going all in. And so I think the idea of putting your personal wealth in it, we're already taking like very low, like I'm taking very low salary right now. And so that in some ways I'm already making financial sacrifices for this. So I think diversifying and getting people who also believe in me to be part of the journey, I think it's important. So that's one. But I think the other one that's maybe more interesting is this idea that when you bootstrap a company, you have to move slower because it takes longer for you to like get to the point where you can hire another engineer and scale. And it makes you make certain decisions that might not always be the best for the business. The opposite of that is sometimes when you raise VC money at too high of a valuation, you are pushed to grow too fast. It's like the opposite of that. Like you're pushed to grow too fast. It's also not healthy.
Yeah.
So I think you have to find like a middle ground where you are taking external capital, but at a rate that makes sense to where you are as a business. So I don't really believe in like, like I could have, based on my background and all of that, I could have probably raised at a higher valuation when I did our pre-seed. But I think if I had done that, like the pressure would have been such that like we wouldn't have had the time to do the research. There would have been a lot more pressure to have revenue really fast, and we might have built the wrong product because we wouldn't have like felt like we can actually take our time to do the research to build the right thing. So I think there's something around like finding that middle ground till you get external help and you're not in it on your own. And if, VCs can actually be extremely helpful. Like some of our early design partners came from VCs, and but also don't like raise like a giant valuation just because you can if you don't think your business is like should be valued at that. Which I think is like, I think at Branch sometimes we always raised a bit higher than the valuation I think we should have had. And I think there were some downsides to that.
That is really interesting. And for someone who, like myself, I've never done a venture backed startup, how do you know what is the right amount to raise? Like, for example, you spent the 9 months in deep research. How much did you raise before, if that's public? And how did you know what amount you wanted to raise before something like that?
I mean, I think like you, like you could have raised like a very small, there were three options. We could have raised a small pre-seed, which is like
Yeah.
1 to 2 million. You could have raised like basically like a seed, which is like, somewhere like 3 to 5 million. Or you can go for a very large seed, which is like 7 to 10 million, which some companies. And I think I went for the middle ground. I think I could have gone for the higher one, and I probably could have done it. I don't know, but I think it's possible that we could have done that just based on like our background, the size of the market. So I think for me, it was like I wanted to raise enough money where I had time to really figure out product market fit and what we're building. And like we could start building and making revenue. And I didn't want to like raise I wanted to have enough where it gave us some time to do this research. And probably the smaller would have been hard. We would have probably run out of money if we went to like the 1 million by now. And we're making revenue now, and like we could have probably raised now, but I like having the option to use, we were very careful with the money that we raised, and we still have a lot in the bank, so we're doing good. But now we have enough that we can like scale, and like it just gives you a lot of options. But if we had raised like a monster seed at like 7 to 10 million, I think the expectations would have been like you have to get to revenue and you have to like get to a Series A, and so we just kind of like you know we went the middle ground. I think it's hard to know. I think it's a mix of like how much can you raise. Some companies maybe don't have enough to be able to raise that middle. They have to start with a smaller, and that's okay too.
It makes sense though. So there's almost a trade off between if you raise too little, that means you're gonna have to raise again in the future, which means maybe you move faster than you should move to really understand the market. But if you raise too much, then there is an increasing expectation, which again means you have to move faster than you should to get to revenue in order to prove that you're worth that valuation. That makes a
Yeah, and
lot of
higher, much
sense.
higher revenue. So I think if you can find like what the middle ground is for you, where you don't raise too much, where you like can go in the wrong direction, but you don't raise too little, it gives you some wiggle room to test things out. And
And how do you think about starting with a co-founder versus starting solo?
I think it depends a lot on the person. I personally am not a person who can be a solo founder. I know that about myself. I think I get energy from being around people. I love having accountability. So I think for me, I don't think starting a solo company was never on the cards. I just know that. But I have many friends who are solo founders and very good at it. I think when it comes to co-founders, I think it's very hard, right, to find the right co-founders. So honestly, when I started Upside, I really wanted to solve this problem, but I also wanted to work with my co-founders. There were people I knew from Branch, and I knew I would enjoy working with them. And I was very upfront to them. I said that, hey, if I was to start this, would you come with me? And I said, hey, like if you guys don't want to do this, I don't think I'm not going to do this on my own. So I either do it with like all of you or like the majority of you, or I'm just not going to do it. So I think for me it was very clear, and I think I kind of knew. I kind of knew who the right co-founders were for me because I know my strengths and weaknesses. So thinking about the people I worked with, I knew people who maybe we had challenging times sometimes working together because we're very different, but I knew that like if we start a company together, it would be a much stronger company because they brought things to the table that I was lacking.
That is so fantastic to have that balance. And it's interesting to me too how when you're in motion, it's easier to find the next thing. Like if you were just a person who had no background in business, it'd be very hard to identify that this is a problem of B2B attribution and then how do you solve it.
Yeah.
But when you're already at branch, you're doing your previous startup, you experience this problem for yourself. And then you start to solve it for yourself and realize, like, oh, I could actually solve this for multiple people. And along the way, you've met the people who are right to solve it with because you're in motion. So just start doing
Yeah.
something seems like
I
a really
mean,
good place to begin.
Branch started because we were building an app, and then the app didn't work. And then, so Branch also came while we were in motion doing something that was never really going to work.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I've never started actually a company that wasn't while I was in motion. And I think that's why I think VCs really love companies that are, if someone had an internal problem and they try to solve it internally and then they come, like which is us, but like there's many other like people who weren't founders. They were like engineers. The company struggled with something and then now try to solve it for themselves. And then like many companies are getting started that way. So it doesn't need to the in
Yes.
motion doesn't need to be your own company. It can be you're like an employee at another company and you just see a problem. But the best I think a lot of the best companies get started that way. Either a founder starting something that doesn't work, like even Slack and so many examples, or you are in a job, something doesn't work, you try to solve it. So
And Slack is such a great example because weren't they actually building a video game? And there was the
yeah,
chat in the video
exactly.
game that became Slack. It's
Yeah,
genius.
yeah, that's exactly right. It's like, yeah, and I mean, we started this Fitbit for dogs, then build an app, and then build Branch.
It's incredible. How do you think about hiring in this current stage? Like when you're in a seed round or early stage startup, how do you decide what roles to hire, when to hire?
I think it's like when you feel like, I mean, we're doing all the roles, and like on the engineering side, Jonas like was getting so overwhelmed, and so like we started like hiring for people in those roles. I think on the go-to-market side, it's like what are the things like we have this concept of like these are the things that you need to be doing, right? Like we need to talk to customers, we need to sell, we need to do marketing, we need to do technical like implementation and onboarding, we need to do product. And each of us can do most of those things. But the way we can do them are not like a full on. Like when Alex does customers meetings and onboarding, he's a 5 out of 5. When Dan does it, he's like a 4 out of 5, and I'm probably a 2 out of 5. Like I struggle a lot more. It takes me a lot longer. When I do marketing, I'm a 5 out of 5, and then like Dan is probably like a 4 out of 5, right? Like so I think it's like, what are the things that need to be done? Who's doing them now? And is that the best thing? Like we each have like a certain amount of things we can like do like in a day. So like now there's not enough things needed that we need, but like when we need something, what is this thing that we're doing, and where are the lowest like skill? So we're actually building a model around this to try to understand like what makes probably for us the next hire on the go-to-market side would be like an account executive who like understands how to like take care of customer, but also is good at like data analysis. So and on the engineering side, it was a very similar like thing. Like Jonas is very good at certain things, but like his front end, his strongest skill probably not. So the first person that we got to help him was a front end person. So I think it's like, yeah, does that make sense?
That does. So almost prioritize really strongly what does the business need right now, and then what skill sets are the low hanging fruit of what's missing right now on the team.
Yeah, missing, or like we can do it, but like we're not like that's not our strongest. So like it's probably going to
Yeah.
be a long time before we hire marketing, because we all have marketing background and we can do marketing with a fairly strong skill set. But like
Yeah.
we'll probably hire salesperson way before we hire marketing, because like we don't have background that we can do it, but we can hire like someone who can do it probably better than us at some point.
Oh, that's quite exciting. It's quite fun to be in the thick of building all of that out. Well, before we come
It's
to
like a
the end,
puzzle.
true, it really is. I don't know, side note, have you ever played Factorio?
No, what is it?
It's this fantastic game where you imagine you're crash landed on a planet and your spaceship is destroyed, and it's a computer game, and now you have to build a new spaceship to get off this planet, but you start from scratch. So you're like
Oh, I
mine
want
by
it. Oh,
hand, and they build a factory, and they eventually build a rocket, and you leave the planet. And I've been playing it recently. One of the
oh
things
my God. It looks amazing. I'm
it's
gonna,
so much
you know what?
fun.
I have like a very, like I have an addiction to dopamine related things, which is video games. This looks dangerous.
It is very dangerous, I will say. But I learned a lot from playing it. And one of the things was realizing kind of what you were saying about hiring, that the thing that works for me in one stage of the game, it's like, oh, here's how I optimize my coal production. Well, later in the game, I don't need coal anymore. And I need to rework the setup, kind of like the org chart, to work for what I need at that stage in the game. And sometimes it's very frustrating because you're like, why did I spend all this time building a perfect coal factory when now I don't even need coal? But then you realize, like, actually, I did need coal to get to where I am now, and it wasn't wasted effort. If I had built the perfect final form of my factory, I never would have gotten here in the first place. So sometimes building things in the
Yeah,
short term
totally.
is worthwhile.
100%. Yeah. I so agree with that. We talked about that at Branch a lot, actually, like how
Oh, interesting.
you like the way I think about it is like every part of your company is like a video game level. And the hardest thing about being a founder, in my opinion, and this Instacart founder also was talking about this, is the fact that you get very good at playing a level, and then you
Yes.
think that you're gonna beat the boss, and then you move to the next level. And the next level is completely different, and you start from zero, and you need to learn completely different skills and everything you did in level two, but you could have never made it to the next level until you got, yeah.
Yes. That
So,
is so true. Wait, what are your favorite computer games?
well, I'm playing like my favorite like of all time is probably Elden Ring, which is a game that helped me. It's funny, like I've never played console games. I used to watch my boyfriend played like a long time ago. And then I think when I was like when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, I decided to buy a PlayStation and I played Elden Ring because I used to watch my boyfriend play Dark Souls and I didn't think I could do it, but I beat it. And then I talked to both my old co-founder and my ex, and both of them like gave up. And then I was like, if I can do this, I can build a company and be a CEO. So it was like the thing that gave me like, because it's considered a pretty hard game and it was the first game I ever played. But I think, like I also play, like I'm playing something like Slay the Spire now and I play threes. And I try to play things that are less. When I played like Clash of Clans, I got so addicted that like, you know, I I would like stay on the side. Like when there was a thing, I would like pull on the side of the road and be late to my haircut appointment because I would needed to be part of the clan. So I'm trying to not play addictive games with others because those are like very. So I'm trying to play only solo games.
That is smart. I love that analogy of how it is a subset of life. You get this sort of condensed form of if I can do it here, I can also do it in actual life. It is such a good opportunity to see how you can grow and perform.
Yeah, but you can't let it take over your life, which I think sometimes with video games.
It
They
really can.
especially something like Elden Ring or a console game, like you do it, you finish it, there's nothing else. But there are games that never end, right? Like Clash of Clans and stuff.
Yes.
So I'm trying to not. I forbid myself from playing those.
I used to play League of Legends a long, long time ago, and it's the same way where there's no ending. And if you win a game, they're like, "Great, let me play one more." And if you lose a game, you're like, "Well, let me win one before I finish tonight." And the next thing you know, it's 2 a.m.
Yes. Oh my God. I got Clash of Clans. They have like a version. Do you know there's like a new Clash of Clans? I don't remember the name, but like you can play online and the game is about 10 minutes and you can play really fast. No, not Clash of Clans, sorry,
Oh,
Settlers of
League of
Catan.
Legends. Fair.
No,
Okay.
Settlers of Catan, they have
Settlers is
like a
fun.
online version. It's like you can play live with people and they've like really got the game dynamics where the game goes really fast.
Oh,
But
wow.
like I would like play one and I would lose and I'd be like, just one more. And I'm like, oh shit, like 1 a.m. And like my dopamine was going crazy. So like I had to believe that.
It is painful. It is painful. Well, before we end the interview, I've got a lightning round for you. So I'll throw out some very quick questions. Feel free to give a brief answer, a long answer. First question: perfect data that takes 6 months to get, or directionally correct insights that you can act on today?
Directionally directional insights that you can act on today. But they need to be directionally accurate. And many cases they're not.
That is very
There's
true.
no perfect
Yes.
data. There is no perfect data. Like I think even what we're building is not perfect. It's so much better than everything else, but there's never gonna be perfect. There might be something that happened that no one catches.
Very true. Being right but unpopular, or being wrong but loved by the team?
Come on, that's a hard one. I mean, I am a rebel and I don't care that much about what others think, so I would definitely go being right and unpopular. But that's probably not what makes you a really good leader in the long term. So I think you need a mix of both. You need to find a way to like sometimes be okay with being wrong, even if you know, and let people make their own mistakes.
That is a good point. And knowing when does being wrong really, really matter, and when is it a little bit okay to be wrong in this area?
Like if I think something's not gonna work, do I always tell the person and not let them try it? Or sometimes if the risk is low, I let them try it so they can actually learn on their own versus but if the risk is really high, I probably just shut it down just because like I have very high confidence not gonna work. And sometimes I
Yes.
am wrong, sometimes I'm wrong. Like I've been wrong.
Same. On rare occasions. Very, very rarely, but sometimes. Hiring specialists or hiring generalists?
Oh, I mean, depends on the size of the company. At the beginning, hire generalists, especially with AI, you can hire a general, but there is a point at which you need a specialist. And I think maybe hire generalists as full-time employees that can help, and then hire specialists as contractors for very specific things.
Smart. Inbound marketing or outbound sales?
Well, I used to be all about inbound marketing, but interestingly enough, as we're getting deals now and stuff, we do get inbound, but so much inbound has a lot of issues. Like how I've never been stood up by an outbound call that I set up. Let me tell you how many times I've been stood up by like the people loving my LinkedIn post and requesting a demo. Somehow when we do warm outbound, people are like serious and they like listen. So I'm like, I think they're both important, but I'm starting to like understand the value of outbound.
That is an interesting point. That almost the interest is higher if they're willing to respond to outbound. There's a higher commitment than if they just reach out on inbound.
Or but also like it's very hard to qualify inbound, right? Like don't like and they're like, but they're interested versus like with outbound, you're only gonna go after customers that like would really benefit from a product, even though they don't know yet. Versus the inbound, you get like so much randomness and people who are just curious and they don't fully understand what you do.
That's a good point
Do
too.
people know what they want or do you know what they want more? It's very much like, are you paternalistic and you think you know what people need, or do you want them to know? Do you believe that they know what they need? I tend to be more paternalistic and think that sometimes people with more information know best what others need than they sometimes know themselves.
100%, especially if they're busy with something else and they're not trying to solve, say, for your case, the attribution problem right now. It might not be top of mind. They might not be looking for it, but this can really help you. It's going to be a lot more of a clear connection.
Or they have the problem, but they're like not looking on LinkedIn or not searching for it. They just don't think that there's a solution out there for it,
Yes.
like,
It reminds me of
yeah.
I forget what it's called, but like when they used to train elephants in circuses, they would tie the elephant when it was young and it would realize, like, oh, I can't break the rope. And then when it gets older, it could break the rope, but it doesn't know it can break the rope. And so it behaves as if it cannot. And it's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
Like we might think, oh, this is an unsolvable problem and not know
Yeah.
Mada's solved the problem. I can actually just talk to Mada. Investor meetings or customer meetings?
I mean, customer meetings, but sometimes investor meetings can lead to customer meetings.
True.
Investors, like, especially when you're like thinking about fundraising and investors are potentially excited about you, they will make good intros.
Very good tip. And last one, coding late into the night or networking events.
For me, I mean, I don't really code anymore. I think I don't enjoy networking events, but I think I'm good at it and they're good for me. So probably networking events, even though I'm way more comfortable maybe not coding into the night, but writing content or creating into the night. So yeah.
Very reasonable. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been way too much fun. Where can people go to learn more about you and more about Upside?
And I think you can just find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot on LinkedIn, so that's my main platform.
Fantastic. Well, all of that will be below if you're on YouTube or in the show notes if you're on another platform. Mada, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. This was so fun.